The first sound Alex heard that morning wasn't his alarm. It was a 6:42 a.m. notification from Hinge, a match. In the half-light of his 24th floor apartment in Long Island City, the screen's glow cut through the dark. He blinked, his mouth dry. He'd fallen asleep scrolling again. The match was with Samantha. Her profile had pictures from a hiking trip in the Catskills and a rooftop party in Williamsburg. Her first message, sent last night, read, "Hey, love your profile. That picture at the Oculus is so cool." He stared at it. His brain, still fuzzy with sleep, kicked into its familiar, tired gear. Craft a response. Be clever. Be memorable. Don't be like all the other guys. He typed, "Thanks. That was a wild day. The architecture there always makes me feel like I am in a sci-fi movie." He deleted it. Too try hard. He tried again. "Hey, Samantha, the Catskills shot is incredible. Which trail was that?" He deleted that too. It was generic. He could already see the conversation tree playing out in his head. They'd talk about trails, then maybe favorite hikes, and then the whole thing would fizzle out by Wednesday. With a soft thud, he put the phone face down on the gray linen sheets. This was Tuesday, and Tuesday meant locking down a potential date for the weekend. That was the unspoken rule of the game. If you didn't secure plans by Wednesday night, you were relegated to the ambiguous graveyard of maybe next week. The pressure was already building, a low hum in his chest. He dragged himself to the shower, but the steam couldn't quite wash off the fatigue. He was a 29-year-old associate brand manager. He could run a client meeting, build a campaign timeline, and analyze market data without breaking a sweat. So why did crafting a simple "hey" to a stranger feel like he was defusing a bomb? The office was a sleek glass box in Flatiron. His commute was a 7-minute walk to the subway, a 15-minute ride on a packed N train, and another 5-minute walk. It was 45 minutes of perfect, uninterrupted swiping time. He stood, one hand gripping a cold metal pole, the other thumb moving in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic motion. Swipe left, swipe right. Match. A little dopamine hit. A tiny jolt of validation. He opened the chat. Her profile said she loved travel tacos and good vibes. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. What do you even say to that? Everyone loved those things. It felt like a placeholder for a personality. He closed the app and opened his work email instead. It was just easier. Lunch was a $16 grain bowl from Sweet Green. He ate it at his desk, but not before taking the obligatory overhead photo for his Instagram story. #lunchbreak, #NYC eats. It was a performance, a carefully curated illusion of a life being lived. While he ate, he scrolled through his own feed. Pictures of him at a friend's birthday party, at a themed bar, a weekend trip to D.C., a perfectly plated pasta from a new restaurant in the West Village. From the outside, it looked like the life of someone who was busy, interesting, and connected. So why did he feel like he was just watching a trailer for a movie he wasn't actually in? A date was set for that night, 8 p.m. at a cozy, dimly lit wine bar in the West Village, a place he'd found on a best first date spots listicle online. This was his 5th first date this month. His preparation was a well-practiced ritual. He reviewed his mental dossier of stories, 3 good ones. There was the one about a chaotic work trip to Chicago, the one about growing up in Connecticut and learning to sail, and the one about the time he got lost in the Paris metro. They were good stories. They usually got a laugh. He put on the date jacket, a navy bomber that felt just a bit stiffer and more formal than his everyday one. The bar smelled of old wood and Pinot Noir. The handshake with Chloe was firm, a little damp. "Great to finally meet you," he said, his voice a notch too enthusiastic. They slid into a booth. The small talk began, following a familiar script. "What do you do? Where do you live? How long have you been in the city?" He waited for his cue. When she mentioned traveling, he saw his opening. "Oh, that reminds me," he said, launching into the Paris metro story. He told it well, timing the punchlines perfectly. She smiled, she nodded. He finished. A beat of silence hung in the air. "So what do you do for fun?" she asked. He listed his hobbies, trying new restaurants, going to the gym, catching up with friends. It sounded less like a passion and more like a LinkedIn profile under the interests section. He could feel it happening in real time. The slow, gentle fade. The energy was seeping out of the booth like air from a tiny invisible puncture. The conversation was polite, but it was just bouncing back and forth like a ping-pong ball, never landing, never diving deeper. They split the check. The Venmo request for 40 equities or 50 popped up on his phone before he'd even gotten his jacket on. The walk to the subway was quiet. The late summer air was warm, but he felt a chill. He replayed every line, every joke, every moment in his head. Where did it go wrong? Was it the story? Was his jacket wrong? Should he have picked a different bar? The endless what-ifs were exhausting. He got home at 10:37 p.m. The apartment was dark and silent. He tossed his keys into a ceramic bowl by the door, and the sound was startlingly loud in the quiet. He poured a glass of water and stood at his floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glittering grid of Manhattan. A city of 8 million people, 8 million stories, 8 million hearts beating behind those glowing windows. And in that moment, he had never felt more alone in his entire life. He picked up his phone and opened Hinge again. The little red notification circle showed 3 new matches. For a split second, a spark of hope. Maybe one of them would be different. He clicked. The first one's profile prompt read, "Looking for a partner in crime for spontaneous adventures." He'd seen that line, or some version of it, 1,000 times before. The spark fizzled and died, replaced by a deep, familiar ache. It was the ache of effort without result. The ache of performing without ever being seen. The ache of believing that if he just found the right combination of words, the right photo, the right story, the right jacket, then he would finally be chosen. But tonight, there was just the glow of the screen, the silence of his apartment, and the weight of being one of 8 million searching for a connection in the digital dark. If this story resonates with you, you're not alone. The landscape of modern connection is tough to navigate, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Remember to be kind to yourself through the process. Thanks for watching, and if you have your own stories or thoughts, share them in the comments below. See you next time. He fell onto his couch, the leather cool against his skin. He scrolled mindlessly through reels of other people's perfect lives. A thought landed, heavy and uncomfortable. It wasn't a question of how. He knew the how. Swipe, match, message, date, repeat. He'd optimized every step. The uncomfortable question was, why? Why did every conversation feel like a transaction? Why did a room full of people feel lonelier than an empty apartment? Why was he, a guy who could pitch a multi-million-dollar brand, completely unable to pitch himself? He looked at his reflection in the dark TV screen, a tired face, lit by the lonely blue light of his phone. He was doing everything the world told him to do. He was putting himself out there. He was hustling. He was optimizing his profile, his photos, his openers. He was spending roughly 47 minutes a day, every day, on this digital dance. That's almost 6 hours a week. A part-time job. For what? For 1, maybe 2 dates a week that left him feeling emptier than when he started. The lie, he believed, was so simple, so seductive. He believed that if he just tried harder on the app, he would win the game off the app. More effort and equaled better results out. It was the same logic that got him through college, that got him this job, this apartment. Hustle, grind, optimize. But what if connection wasn't a game you could win with strategy? What if charisma wasn't something you could add to yourself like a new skill on your resume? What if, in trying so hard to be interesting, he had forgotten how to be interested? The phone slipped from his hand onto the cushion. The city lights twinkled, indifferent. He was so tired of the performance, tired of the chase, tired of feeling like a product on a shelf, hoping someone would pick him. Tomorrow, he would wake up and do it all again. The matches, the messages, the mental preparation. But tonight, in the quiet, a seed of a new question was planted. It was an uncomfortable, scary, almost ridiculous question. What if he stopped trying to be charismatic and just started being human? The thought was so simple it felt revolutionary. And as he finally turned off the light, letting the true dark of the city swallow his room, that tiny question was the only thing that didn't feel heavy. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like a possibility. The next morning, Alex's phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Weekly 1-1 with Sarah, 10 a.m. He groaned, rolling out of bed. Work. At least that was a game he understood. Rules, metrics, clear objectives. He showered, dressed in his standard uniform of dark jeans and a well-fitted polo, and grabbed his backpack. As he locked his apartment door, he caught his own reflection in the hallway mirror. He paused. He gave himself a quick, practiced smile. It looked fine, friendly, approachable. It was the same smile he used in meetings and on dates. He realized, with a strange detachment, that he had a work smile and a date smile. Did he have a just Alex, alone in his hallway, smile? He wasn't sure. The meeting with his boss, Sarah, was in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Broadway. The sun was glinting off the buildings, filling the room with a sharp, clean light. "So, Alex," Sarah said, sipping her cappuccino, "how's the Q4 campaign shaping up? Walk me through your confidence level." Alex straightened his back. This was his moment. He launched in. "Sarah, I'm feeling extremely confident. We've optimized our ad spend across 3 key platforms. We're A/B testing the hero image, and our messaging is tightly aligned with the brand's core pillars of sustainability and innovation. I believe we're positioned to not only meet but exceed our KPIs." He spoke in smooth, confident bullets. He used phrases like leveraging synergies and driving engagement. Sarah nodded, taking notes. It was a perfect performance. He left the meeting feeling a flush of professional pride. He'd nailed it. Later at his desk, he opened Hinge during a quick break. A new match, Lena, had messaged him. "Hey, cool photos. You look like you have fun." His brain, still in work mode, immediately started drafting a response. It felt eerily similar to preparing for his meeting. Craft a compelling reply. Highlight key benefits. Your fun personality. Align with her stated interest. Having fun. Drive towards a conversion. A date. He typed, "Hey, Lena. Thanks. I try to keep things lively. That shot of you at the Rockaways looks amazing. Summer in the city isn't complete without a beach day." He hit send. It was a good opener. strategic. It referenced her profile, showed he paid attention, and suggested a shared interest. But as he looked at the sent message, that old, hollow feeling crept back in. He had just run a mini-marketing campaign for himself. Lena wasn't Sarah, but the mechanism inside him was the same. Perform, pitch, persuade. This was the trap, and he hadn't even seen it until now. He called his friend Mark that evening. Mark lived in Bushwick, was a successful project manager for a tech startup, and was, in Alex's opinion, even better at the game than he was. They met at a noisy craft beer bar under the rumbling JMZ line. "I'm just in a slump, man," Alex shouted over the din of the music and the train overhead. "It's like, I do everything right. I have the conversations, I get the dates, but then nothing. It all just evaporates." Mark took a long pull of his IPA. "Dude, I hear you. I've started doing this thing. Before a date, I literally prepare 3 bullet points, like 3 interesting stories or facts about my life. My trip to Portugal last April, that time I met that semi-famous DJ at a warehouse party. You know, the story about my cousin's weird business idea. I just rotate them in when there's a lull. It keeps things smooth. Ever felt like dating is just a series of job interviews you're constantly failing? I remember talking to my friend Mark, and he was describing his dating strategy like it was a software update. Download the latest anecdote pack, install, run. He was basically recycling his greatest hits of stories and jokes on every first date. He asked me, "Does it work?" And he shrugged, saying, "I get second dates, sometimes thirds, but then they fizzle. It's like they're bored of my greatest hits album, you know." That conversation stuck with me. On the subway home, I looked around. Almost every single person was staring into a phone, a sea of people, together in a rattling metal tube, but completely alone in their own digital bubbles. I remembered a term I'd read somewhere: ambient loneliness. That's exactly what it felt like. The background hum of the city, the low-grade buzz of being surrounded by people, but never truly connecting. When I got home, I did something a little strange. I opened my phone's photo gallery and tapped on a folder I made called Dating. It was a carefully curated collection of me at my best, or at least what I thought was my best. Me at the top of a mountain, looking thoughtfully into the distance. Me at a fancy cocktail bar, laughing perfectly on cue. Me holding up some ridiculous over-the-top dessert at a trendy restaurant. Every photo was a performance. Then I scrolled back, way back, past the dating folder, past the work screenshots. I found a picture from about a year ago. It was me and my college buddy, Mike. We were on his couch, wearing old sweatshirts, hair a mess, playing a video game, and my face was caught in this moment of genuine, ugly laughter. Mouth wide open, eyes all scrunched up. I looked ridiculous, but I also looked real. I would never ever use that photo on a dating profile. It was completely off-brand. It didn't show an interesting, adventurous life. It showed a normal, uncurated moment of joy. And that's when it hit me. That's when the real villain of my dating story finally showed its face. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't that I wasn't trying hard enough. The villain was a belief I'd absorbed from the city, from the apps, from the very air I was breathing. The belief that charisma is something you add better stories, add better photos, add a cooler hobby, add a wittier bio, add a more impressive job title, add. It was a never-ending personal renovation project, and honestly, it was exhausting. I was so busy adding all these layers to my personality that I'd completely lost touch with the person underneath. The person who makes ugly laughing faces on a couch. I thought about my last date. I'd been so focused on delivering my perfectly rehearsed Paris Metro story that I hadn't thought actually been present. I wasn't paying attention to see if she was even interested in Paris or metros or stories at all. I was performing a monologue, not having a dialogue. I was a salesman, and she was a potential client who had very politely decided not to buy what I was selling. There's actually a name for this trap. I looked it up later. It's called the performer's paradox. You perform being interesting to get validation, but the performance itself prevents the genuine connection that would actually make you feel validated. It's a perfect, frustrating loop. You perform to connect, but performing is the very thing that keeps you disconnected. I looked around my apartment. It was nice, clean, modern. I even had a big piece of abstract art on the wall that I de-bought because an article told me it would be a great conversation starter. You know how many conversations it had started? 0. It just sat there, looking expensive and, in a weird way, a little lonely, just like me. So a new thought started to form. What if I was going about this all backwards? What if charisma isn't about addition, but about subtraction? Not about building a more impressive facade, but about quietly removing the walls I'd built around myself. What if the most attractive thing I could possibly offer someone wasn't a perfected version of my life, but just my genuine, curious attention? The idea was terrifying. It meant being vulnerable. It meant maybe not having a perfect story ready to go. It meant there might be awkward silences in the conversation. It meant I might not get the second date as often. But then I thought, what was I really getting now? A series of successful performances that left me feeling like an empty theater after the show is over. So, I did it. I closed the dating app, and not just for the night. I held my finger down on the icon until it started to jiggle, and I deleted it from my phone. It vanished with a satisfying little puff animation. My screen looked strangely bare without it. And for the first time in years, I had no plan, no strategy, no 3 bullet points prepared for my next social interaction. I just sat there in the quiet of my own apartment, with the muffled sounds of the city drifting up from 24 stories below. I'm not going to lie, I felt a pang of anxiety, that little voice in my head saying, "What are you doing? What if you're opting out completely? What if you're giving up?" But underneath that anxiety, there was something else, a tiny spark of relief. It felt like I'd been holding a heavy weight for years, and I'd finally, just for a second, let it go. The realization settled in. I didn't need to be more, I just needed to be here. But that led to an even scarier question whispering in my mind. If I stop performing, who is actually there? And how on earth do you meet someone when you don't even know who you reintroducing? The silence in my apartment suddenly felt very, very loud. The next morning, my routine had a hole in it. That first 20 minutes on the subway, which used to be a blur of swiping and typing, was now just me, sitting there. I felt naked. I watched other people, their thumbs flying, their faces lit by that familiar blue glow. I felt this powerful itch in my own thumb. What was I missing? A match? A message? The endless, tantalizing possibility of what could be? I had to clench my hand around my phone to stop myself from re-downloading the app. I told myself, this is stupid. You're opting out. You're going to be left behind. But as the days went on, something shifted. The itch in my thumb faded. Instead of looking down at a screen, I started looking up. I started noticing things. The way the light hit the buildings in the morning, the sound of a musician playing on the platform, the tired expressions and the occasional smiles on the faces of the people around me. I was still surrounded by ambient loneliness, but for the first time, I felt like I was part of it, not just observing it through a screen. Instead of trying to add things to my life, I started trying to subtract the noise. I stopped listening to podcasts on every walk and just listened to the city. I put my phone in another room when I got home from work. I started reading a physical book again, feeling the paper under my fingers. It sounds so simple, but these little acts of subtraction started to carve out space in my mind. And in that space, I started to notice who was actually there. The guy who really enjoys the simple quiet of a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee. The guy who gets genuinely excited talking about old sci-fi movies. The guy who makes that ugly laughing face. It wasn't a cooler, more interesting version of me. It was just me. Flawed, a little boring sometimes, but real. I decided to try an experiment. Thus, I rejoined a local board game group I'd been a part of years ago. No pressure, no agenda. Not to meet someone, but just to be somewhere. To do something I genuinely enjoyed. The first night was awkward. I didn't have any pre-planned stories. I just showed up. I listened. I asked people questions about the games they liked, about their day, and a funny thing happened. By not trying to be interesting, the conversations became more interesting. We weren't performing. We were just a group of people, connecting over a shared hobby. There was laughter, real, uncurated laughter. I'm not here to tell you I've found the secret, or that I am now in a perfect relationship. The journey is ongoing. There are still days I feel that pull, that urge to put the mask back on, to perform. But I'm learning that genuine connection isn't a prize you win for having the best profile. It's a quiet, slow process that happens when you have the courage to just show up as you are, subtraction and all. It's about being present, not perfect. And that feels so much better than getting a second date. It feels like coming home to yourself. Thanks for listening. But he remembered that tiny spark of relief from last night. He decided to give it one day, just one. No apps, no scrolling, no performing. His mission, if you could even call it that, felt embarrassingly simple. A friend of a friend, someone who supposedly knew about this stuff, had mentioned one rule over beers once. Alex had written it down in the Notes app on his phone, next to grocery lists and work ideas. He found it now, scrolling past Buy Dish Soap and Q4 Brainstorm. It said, the 10-minute proximity rule. The instructions were absurdly basic. Go somewhere, anywhere that's not work or home. A coffee shop, a park bench, a bookstore. Sit there for 10 minutes. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Don't talk to anyone. Don't even try. Just be present. Observe. That's it. It felt less like a hack and more like a punishment, like he was being put in time out. But he had nothing else. So after work, instead of heading straight to the subway, he turned left on 23rd Street. He walked a few blocks until he found a small, independent coffee shop he'd never noticed before, tucked between a dry cleaner and a shoe repair place. It was called The Daily Grind, which he almost took as a personal insult. The bell above the door jingled as he walked in. The smell was immediate and rich: dark roast coffee, steamed milk, and the faint sweet scent of pastries. The place was warm, lit by soft yellow bulbs, and about half full. He ordered a black coffee from a tired-looking barista with a sleeve of intricate tattoos. He found a small, wobbly table by the front window. He took a deep breath. This was it, his big move. He placed his phone face down on the table. He tapped the side to activate Do Not Disturb. The little crescent moon icon appeared. He set a timer for 10 minutes, and then he just sat. The first minute was agony. His mind was a roaring engine with no place to go. He looked at his coffee. He looked out the window at people walking by, their pace so quick and determined. He looked at his hands. He noticed a small healed cut on his thumb from where he'd nicked himself making dinner last week. He listened. The hiss of the espresso machine, the soft clink of ceramic cups, a low murmur of conversation from a couple studying a laptop together, the gentle jazz playing from a small speaker behind the counter. He felt incredibly self-conscious. Did people think he was weird, just sitting there doing nothing? The guy at the next table was typing furiously on his laptop. The woman in the corner was reading a physical book, turning the pages with a soft swish. Everyone was occupied. He was the only one who seemed to have no purpose. He was a ghost in the machine. He checked the timer. Only 2 minutes had passed. His knees started bouncing under the table. He had the intense urge to pick up his phone, just to check the time, just to see if anyone had texted, just to look like he was doing something. This felt like a waste of time. He could be home, reheating leftovers, maybe watching an episode of something. He could be, he thought with a pang, swiping. At least that felt productive. This felt like he was just taking up space 4 minutes in. He forced himself to look around the room, really look. He saw the barista, the one with the tattoos, expertly swirling milk into a large cup, creating a perfect white leaf pattern on the top. He saw the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light coming through the window. He saw the couple with the laptop. The woman was pointing at the screen and smiling, and the man was smiling back, a real, crinkly-eyed smile. It wasn't a performance, it was a private, happy moment, and he was just witnessing it. Something in his chest, a tight coil of wire that had been wound for months, began to loosen. Just a fraction. 6 minutes. He took a sip of his coffee. It was bitter and hot. He actually tasted it. He noticed the way the steam curled up from the mug in the cool air of the cafe. He heard a snippet of conversation from behind him. And then I told him, if the recipe calls for fresh basil, dried basil is a crime. A warm, grandmotherly laugh followed. He found himself smiling at nothing. He wasn't trying to be interesting. He wasn't preparing a story. He was just receiving the world, letting it come to him instead of frantically chasing it down. It was a completely foreign feeling. It was quiet. It was slow. It was almost peaceful. The timer buzzed in his pocket, a gentle vibration. 10 minutes were up. He almost didn't want it to end. He picked up his phone, turned off Do Not Disturb. No notifications. The world had kept turning without his input. He felt a strange mix of disappointment and freedom. He stood up, put on his jacket, and headed for the door. As he passed the counter, the tired barista was wiping down the espresso machine. She looked up and made brief, accidental eye contact with Alex. It was just a split second. Normally Alex would have looked away immediately, or given a quick, tight nod. But he was still in that strange, soft, quiet place from the 10 minutes. So instead of looking away, he gave her a small, genuine smile. Not his customer service smile. Just a simple, human acknowledgement. "Have a good night," he said, his voice quieter than usual. She paused her wiping. She looked surprised for a half-second. Then her own tired face softened. A real smile touched her eyes. "You too," she said. "Thanks." That was it. No exchange of numbers. No deep conversation. Just two people, for 1 second, seeing each other as human beings and not functions. A customer and a barista. It was a microscopic victory. It meant absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of dating. And yet, as Alex stepped out into the crisp evening air, it meant everything. Drill number 1, the 2-second greeting. Make eye contact and a slight nod, or a simple, "Hey," or "Have a good one," to one person per day. Not a conversation, just an acknowledgement. A human being recognizing another human being. The first day he tried it, he felt like a spy on a dangerous mission. He picked his target carefully. The security guard in the lobby of his office building. A man he'd walked past maybe 500 times without truly seeing. As Alex walked through the revolving door, his heart did a silly little thump. He made eye contact. The guard looked back, expectant, probably thinking Alex needed directions. Alex's mouth felt dry. He managed a tight smile and a nod. "Morning," he croaked. The guard's stern expression softened. He gave a single, solid nod back. "Morning, sir." That was it. It took 2 seconds. But for Alex, it was a leap. He'd broken the invisible rule of city life. Don't make unnecessary contact, and the sky hadn't fallen. In fact, the next day, the guard nodded first. "Morning." Alex nodded back, his smile a little easier this time. A tiny thread of recognition woven. Drill number 2. The context comment. Make one observational, non-transactional comment to a stranger. No asking for anything. No expecting a conversation. Just putting a little piece of observed reality out into the world. This one was harder. It felt like throwing a paper airplane into the wind and hoping it did not get slapped away. He was in line at his regular bodega on a Tuesday morning, waiting to buy a banana and a bottle of water. The guy in front of him was buying 3 identical energy drinks and a pack of gum. He was wearing a bike helmet. As the cashier rang him up, Alex heard himself say, not too loud, "3 of those? You must have a heck of a day ahead." The cyclist turned, looked surprised, then grinned a tired grin. "You have no idea. 3 back-to-back client meetings across town. I'm running on fumes and hope." He paid, grabbed his drinks. "Wish me luck," he said as he pushed out the door. "Good luck," Alex called after him. The cashier, a woman named Maria who he'd also just started greeting, chuckled. "That's Paolo. He always buys 3, every Tuesday." A tiny piece of neighborhood lore, freely given. He didn't get Paolo's number. He didn't become his best friend. But for a moment, they weren't 2 isolated bodies in a line. They were 2 guys acknowledging the shared struggle of a tough Tuesday. The comment had no agenda. It was just a shared observation about the human condition, disguised as a remark about energy drinks. Then came the setback. It was inevitable. At a crowded coffee shop near Union Square, he saw a woman reading a book he loved. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Perfect. A context comment gift from the universe. He waited as she finished a chapter, marked her page, and looked up to take a sip of tea. His pulse quickened. This was it. "Great book," he said, offering a smile. She looked at him. Her expression wasn't unfriendly, but it was closed. Blank. Like he was a pop-up ad she was trying to close. She gave a tiny, non-committal hum. Then she looked back down at her book, her body language turning slightly away from him. Rejection. It hit him like a physical slap. The old familiar shame flooded in, hot and sharp. "See? You're bothering people. You're awkward. Stay in your lane." He wanted to leave the coffee shop immediately. He felt his face get warm. The old Alex would have replayed this for days, using it as proof that he should just stop trying. But he'd been doing his drills. He'd been sitting in the quiet for 10 minutes a day. He took a deep, slow breath, tasting the bitter coffee on his tongue. He heard the voice of his friend's friend in his head, a voice he was starting to internalize. The drill is the action, not the outcome. Did you make a normal human comment about a shared interest? Yes. That's the win. Her reaction is her world, her mood, her story. You have no control over it. The win is that you put yourself out there without a script. He stayed in his seat. He didn't run. He let the uncomfortable feeling wash over him, and then, like a wave, it receded. He was still there. He was okay. The woman kept reading. The world kept spinning. It wasn't a rejection of him. It was a reflection of her moment. Maybe she was having a terrible day. Maybe she just really hated being interrupted. It didn't matter. He had done his drill. He checked the invisible box in his mind. This was the daily war. Not a war against other people, but a war against his own old, scared, performative instincts. Every checked box on his phone's note page was a tiny victory. Greeted Joe the guard. Commented on the funny-shaped cloud to a guy in the park. The list wasn't impressive. It was mundane, but it was real. He started to notice the effects in other places. In work meetings, he listened more. Instead of just waiting for his turn to speak, he found himself actually curious about what others were saying. He asked simpler, more direct questions. What part of that project is most exciting to you? The difference in the responses was night and day. People leaned in, they smiled, they shared more. He even tried drill mudriyacha with a colleague. Over lunch, she asked the standard, "So what's new with you, Alex?" Instead of launching into his usual work updates, he gave a short answer and then turned it. "Work's good, keeping busy. What about you? What's a project you're excited about right now, inside or outside the office?" He felt lighter. The interaction had no goal, no desired outcome. It was just connection. A tiny, almost invisible thread pulled taut between two strangers for a millisecond and then released. It was the opposite of a dating app match. It was frictionless. It was free. He did it again the next day. This time he sat on a bench in Madison Square Park, watching dogs play in the designated run. He watched a tiny, fluffy dog try to befriend a giant, slobbery Great Dane. He laughed out loud, a short, surprised burst of sound. No one was around to hear it. He was laughing just for himself. On the third day, the resistance was stronger. He was running late from work. It was starting to drizzle, and the thought of sitting in a cafe for 10 minutes felt like a chore. "This is pointless," his brain hissed. "You're not meeting anyone. You're just sitting. This isn't a strategy. It's surrender." He almost went straight home, but he remembered the barista's smile, that tiny, warm feeling. He ducked into a small public library branch near Bryant Park. He sat in a worn, upholstered chair between towering shelves of books. The silence here was different, heavy, respectful, full of unspoken thoughts. He saw an older man, his glasses perched on the end of his nose, deeply absorbed in a thick hardcover history book. He saw a student, maybe 19, highlighting a textbook with fierce concentration. He just sat, breathing in the smell of old paper and dust. His mind, which usually raced ahead to the next task, began to slow down, to settle. For 10 minutes, he had no agenda. He wasn't Alex the brand manager or Alex the dater. He was just a guy in a chair, existing. This was the crack in the wall. It wasn't a dramatic breakthrough. It wasn't meeting the love of his life. It was quieter than that. It was the simple, revolutionary act of turning his attention outward instead of perpetually inward towards his own anxieties, his own performance, his own profile. Most people quit here, 95% of them, because it feels like doing nothing. It doesn't give you the quick, addictive hit of a match notification. It's boring. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to be comfortable with silence, with your own thoughts, with simply being an observer instead of the star of the show. But if you stick with it, something shifts. You start to download the human operating system. You remember how to be a person in the world, not an avatar on a screen. You remember how to notice things, the way the light changes in the afternoon, the rhythm of a city street, the 1,000 unspoken stories passing you by every minute. Alex was in the 5% now. He was doing the quiet, invisible work. He was relearning the most fundamental skill of all, how to be present. Not to impress, not to win, but just to be. And as he left the library, the drizzle had stopped. Leaving the pavement slick and shiny under the streetlights, he realized the scary question from before had an answer. If he stopped performing, who was there? Someone who could enjoy a quiet moment. Someone who could appreciate a skilled barista. Someone who could laugh at a silly dog. It wasn't a fully formed personality, but it was a start. It was real. The 10-minute sessions became his anchor, like brushing his teeth. Every day, rain or shine, he found his spot. A bench in Tompkins Square Park, watching old men play chess. A stool at the counter of a quiet diner in the East Village, nursing a cup of coffee. The consistency did something to him. It calmed the frantic, hustling part of his brain. He started to see the city not as a competitive arena, but as a living, breathing stage full of fascinating side characters. He was no longer just the star of his own stressful movie. He was an audience member for everyone else's. But a question started to form. It was one thing to be peacefully alone in a crowd. It was another thing to actually interact. The thought still sent a little jolt of anxiety through him. The old programming was still there. Don't bother people. You'll be awkward. You need an excuse, a reason, a perfect line. He remembered another note from that same conversation with his friend's friend. He called them charisma drills. Not tricks, drills. Like practice for a sport you'd forgotten how to play. They weren't about getting a date. They were about rewiring your instincts. Alex decided to try them. He kept a simple note on his phone, a checklist. No fancy app, just a list with little empty circles he could tap to fill in. She blinked, surprised. Then her face lit up. You know, I've actually been restoring this old vintage radio with my dad. It's so frustrating, but so cool. She talked for 5 minutes straight, her hands moving animatedly. Alex just listened, genuinely interested. He saw a whole new side of her. Not Susan from accounting, but Susan the radio restorer, the daughter. The connection was deeper in those 5 minutes than in 5 years of talking about spreadsheets. This was the transformation, happening in time-lapse. Not a sudden dramatic makeover, but a slow, steady shift in his posture, his eyes, the set of his shoulders. He was no longer scanning rooms for an exit or an opportunity. He was just in them. He carried a quiet confidence that came not from knowing he was impressive, but from being comfortable with not knowing, with being curious. He wasn't doing this alone anymore, either. He'd texted Mark, the friend with the 3 bullet points. At first, Mark was skeptical. You're just talking to people. For no reason. But Alex's energy was different. Less anxious, more calm. Mark agreed to meet him in Washington Square Park one Saturday to try a drill.